Let's move to what I think this election may actually turn on. I mean, you're making a lot about ethics in terms of the culture of corruption that you accuse the Attorney General of. And he, of course, accuses you of ethics violations. And I don't want to go through every one of them, but sure. Help me understand this, because the latest ad says, number one, that you're unethical and you're unfit. I saw that this morning. Help me understand the Cabela thing. He said that you benefited directly from the Cabela situation after you had voted for tax relief for it. Explain that, if you will, and then explain some of these issues that just came up this week about whether or not you've been using campaign funds for your lavish lifestyle.
Yes, on the Cabela's issue, I, of course, worked for a title company as a salaried employee and worked very closely with our city attorney to assure that I followed every ethical guideline when it came to my votes as a city council person. The Cabela's deal was approved and I voted for it because it was good for Fort Worth, because it created an incredible investment on the ground, which would ultimately be on our tax rolls, and because it created an incredible job growth for our community, and it also helped to spur other retail development that occurred along the I-35 corridor in North Fort Worth. As the Economic Development Chair of Fort Worth, I am very proud of the fact that I helped to shepherd almost $1 billion of investment to this city and to create thousands and thousands of jobs. But I'm most proud of the fact that before we ever let go of a public dollar in those deals, we ran them through a very rigorous analysis. Number one, they had to pass a but-for test. But for our participation, would this investment have occurred in our community? And then, even after that test was passed, what would the investment look like? And we had very, very specific, as you know, Bob Ray, job requirements, job creation requirements, supply and service requirements. We were specific in terms of what they had to fulfill in hiring and using minority and women-owned businesses. We were specific in terms of the number of jobs that had to be created, and we gave extra incentives where those jobs were created within census tracts that had high unemployment levels in our central city. And then we responsibly acted every single year to audit those in a very transparent way. So first of all, the commitments were made public, and second of all, the audits of those were made public every year. And where our private partners fell short, we clawed back our tax dollars. And then we got even better at it, and we started structuring our agreements so that our private partners had to earn our participation before they got it. So we weren't even put in a clawback situation. And I'm very proud of the role that I played with our incredibly talented city economic development staff to help create those formulas over the course of the years. Now that's in stark contrast to what the state has done. You may know that I authored that bill that passed last session to audit the Texas Enterprise Fund. And it wasn't predicted that the outcome of that report would arrive until January. In fact, I had to have January as the date to get a lot of my Republican colleagues to sign on to it. But the auditor finished it and revealed it, of course, a couple of weeks ago. And what we find there is extremely troubling, that over $200 million of the $500+ million that's been spent in the 11-year history of the Enterprise Fund was given out without so much as even a formal application for the money. Taxpayers have no idea whether there was a but-for test that was passed. They have no idea what kinds of commitments, if any, were made in terms of the minimum amount of investment, the number of jobs that had to be created, commitments for MWBE goals or veterans hiring goals. None of that existed. And to make matters worse, not only did Governor Perry's office hand the money out in that way, But the Attorney General, Greg Abbott, who was tasked by law, every 30 days, his agency is supposed to be reviewing the expenditure of state funds and to determine whether there are any problems in terms of the use of those funds. Never did his office conduct a review. And when the press asked his office for records related to some of those early beneficiaries of Texas Enterprise Fund money, Greg Abbott wrote that he could not release those applications because they contain proprietary information or because they were protected under the competitive bidding statute that allows those not to be revealed during a competitive bidding process. The reality is that there were no applications. And in order for an attorney general to issue an opinion that they're protected under either of those conditions, they have to have documents to be able to review to determine that those conditions are met. Greg Abbott engaged in a cover-up, plain and simple. He should have come forward and honestly told the press that there were no documents, and that's why they couldn't be released. And I think that, unfortunately, these behaviors threaten very valuable tools because the public loses trust, as I certainly understand they would, with the use of those tools. I believe in public-private partnerships. I believe in the Enterprise Fund and the Emerging Technology Fund. I believe in the Cancer Prevention Fund. I believe in the Special Events Trust Fund. But I believe that they have to be used in a way that requires that those preconditions I spoke about are met, and then that they are audited on a yearly basis. And I also think they ought not to be in the hands of the executive branch of the government solely, but that there needs to be some third-party oversight to determine that there's a check and balance in place, that the T's are being crossed and the I's are being dotted, and that our private partners are making legitimate promises and that they're following through on their promises. With regard to the use of my campaign contributions for an apartment in Austin and an automobile, these are legal and ethical, and almost every legislator uses campaign contributions for these very same purposes. And I, once again, am always very sensitive to making sure that I'm complying with the ethics standards that are in front of me.